I get discouraged for sure, and I will quit fighting at some point. And that point is when the first shovel of dirt hits the top of my box 6 feet down.
Hello and welcome to COS Indiana Live as we bring you Roundtable. The Roundtable segment is presented here every fourth Monday of the month at 7 p.m. We'll be focusing on education and discussion of the topics and challenges we all face as we use the Constitution to save the Constitution. Join us now as we bring you COS Indiana Roundtable with our MC, John Ackerman.
And welcome to COS Indiana Roundtable. I am your host, John Ackerman, and welcome to broadcast number 250 of COS Indiana Live. 250 times now we've come to you. That's a landmark. Our topic tonight is a travesty of justice. I'll be explaining a little bit more about that as we get into the topic. But let's bring the rest of the panel on right now. Cheryl Shopmeyer, Regional Captain, Region 7. Unmute yourself, Cheryl, and hi.
Hello.
Good to see you.
Good to see you.
And Dale Parrish, our COS Indiana Live host. Dale, you've got an exciting announcement. You want to give it now while you're fresh on the screen?
Let me wait till we get everybody else, the rest of the panel up here.
Oh, man, this is your chance. You blew it. Okay, Charlie, good to see you, buddy.
Hey, happy 250.
Happy 250. We've got a couple more. There's Gary from our Indiana team. Gary, unmute yourself. And Ken Kashuba, our state communications coordinator. Ken, I'm going to usurp Dale a little bit. Tell everybody what that QR code is in the upper right-hand corner of the screen.
Sure. Yeah, that QR code, which is hanging over your head, John, that's there for a purpose. That's there for those people who want to. Yeah, very good. You found it. People that want to subscribe to our COS Indiana Live channel, get some extra curricular type activities, some videos, some instructional information, and things about upcoming broadcasts, maybe even a little bit of history on Dale. We're going to try and add some of that. So if you want to find out more about Dale's background, we might get that. So subscribe today.
Wait a minute.
Yeah. And that QR code will be there for the whole program, correct?
And even during the recording, even the recorded version.
All right. So, Dale, I'm going to give you a second chance. What's your big announcement?
Yes, I wanted to let everyone know we, of course, like any other live stream, we track the number of views that we accumulate each month. And obviously, we're always trying to increase the number of views. Well, our previous high number of views, when was that, Ken? I think it was just a couple months ago.
2 months.
We hit just under 33,000 views for the month. Well, I'm very happy to say, and as a comms team, we had set as an ultimate goal that we wanted to exceed 40,000 views. Well, folks, in the month of June, we have already exceeded the all-time high, and it looks very much like we've already gone past the ultimate goal. So we're around 50,000 views for the month of June so far.
Wow.
And we've got another week to go.
Wow.
And of course, tonight's program was going to be so outstanding that I'm sure we're going to get many more views from tonight. So,
well, Dale, you said you wanted to celebrate number 250 with something. So this is the way you celebrate.
I guess,
You're
right. I hadn't thought about that, Ken. Very good point. Very good point. So
50,000 for 250. All right.
Yeah, there you go.
Sounds like a slogan. Okay.
Thank you.
I'll get some campaign buttons made up, and we can all wear them. Well, as I said earlier, the topic for tonight's roundtable is a travesty of justice. And what are we talking about here? We're talking about the recent convictions, the 34 felony convictions of former President Donald J. Trump. And I want to start off by weaving a thread through this thing here. And I want to show you something from the Constitution. In Article 5, it says no person shall be deprived. I mean, in the Fifth Amendment, Fifth Amendment to the Constitution, no person shall be deprived of life, liberty, or property without due process of law. And that's what we're going to focus on, the lack of due process. Now, if you go over to the 14th Amendment, you'll see that it says, nor shall any state deprive any person of life, liberty, or property without due process of law. So 2 times in the amendments, one in the 5th and one in the 14th, you and I and former President Trump are promised, we are guaranteed due process of law. We're going to weave a tapestry over the next 55 minutes that is going to show you in very clear and convincing ways that due process has been bypassed. And we're going to start off, I'm going to ask Ken to talk first about the prosecutor, one Mr. Alvin Bragg. Tell us about Alvin Bragg, Ken.
Who is Alvin Bragg? Alvin Bragg, he took office in 2022. He won the Democratic primary and then the general election, basically, in November 2021, making him Manhattan's first black district attorney. The 49-year-old grew up in Harvard, official value, and he earned his BA from Harvard University and his JD at Harvard Law School. So he's got some credentials there, I believe. So Bragg has spent more than 2 decades working in the criminal justice system before becoming DA. And Alvin Bragg served as an assistant attorney general for the state of New York, also as an assistant U.S. for the Southern District of New York. Now, during his campaign, he made promises to indict Trump. And when he took office, he inherited a years-long grand jury investigation of the alleged payment of Stormy Daniels during his 2016 presidential campaign. But after taking office, Alvin Bragg had concerns about the strength of the case against Trump, leading to the resignation of 2 lead investigators of his department. So earlier this year, Alvin Bragg convened a new grand jury and proceeded with the case. And Bragg, who describes himself as a white-collar prosecutor, involved in a number of high-profile cases. Now, he was involved in 2 cases against the Trump Organization. Bragg oversaw the case against the Trump Organization, which was found guilty late last year. The Trump Organization and Trump Payroll Corp were fined $810,000 and $800,000 respectively. Trump denied involvement and was not personally charged in the case. So now that brings us to some of the behind-the-scenes stuff with Alvin and billionaire George Soros, who's 92 and founder of Open Society, is known for putting millions of dollars behind political candidates. But he's claimed no connection to Bragg. Now, that becomes interesting because I'll get to what Florida Governor Ron DeSantis called out first. He called Bragg as being a Soros-backed, and in response to Bragg's announcement of the indictment against Trump, many Republicans, including Trump, concurred with DeSantis. Now, DeSantis went on to say, the weaponization of the legal system to advance a political agenda turns the rule of law on its head. It's un-American, said DeSantis. The Soros-backed Manhattan district attorney has consistently bent the law to downgrade felonies to excuse criminal misconduct. Yet now he is stretching the law to target a political opponent. So Alvin Bragg denies he knows George Soros, but in May 2021, Soros donated $1 million to the Color of Change PAC, according to Open Secrets. Now, during the same period, the Color of Change PAC endorsed and spent money backing Bragg's campaign. So you have to be the judge of what happened there. But George Soros denies contributing to the prosecutor's campaign, adding that he didn't know him. So we move on to just some of the other things in New York. New York police unions have accused Bragg of being soft on crime. Criminals know that the Manhattan DA will bend over backwards to protect them and not the law-abiding New Yorkers. Now, even the Police Benevolent Association wrote on Twitter last summer, and CBS News reported that. So the president of the Detectives Endowment Association has described Bragg as a pro-criminal politician. So when you start to weave all that together and look at the background and look at how even Bragg looked at the case as being weak and not even really able to be brought forth, this is where we're at, and that is Alvin Bragg.
Okay, Dale, do we have a banner that has that guy's name on it?
Oh, I'm sorry, John. I forgot to put that up there.
Yeah, obviously. Okay, there's Alvin Bragg.
Yeah.
Thanks, Ken. Before we move on, I never thought I would find myself in a position to be quoting the disgraced former governor of the state of New York, Andrew Cuomo. But I read that he was on HBO's Real Time with Bill Maher just this past Friday. And he told Bill Maher that this case never should have been brought because it reeks of politicization. Andrew Cuomo said that. Okay. Well, we're talking about a travesty of justice, and we're talking about the lack of due process. And Ken's description of Alvin Bragg helps to get that horse out of the gate. How's that for a racing analogy? Let's move on to Dale. Talk to us about a guy named Matthew Colangelo.
Colangelo. Well, Ken mentioned some things that he's been involved in, but of course, as we know, Colangelo was the lead prosecutor in the case here, and he had some of his background includes he was a clerk for Supreme Court Justice Sonia Sotomayor, and served on the U.S. Court of Appeals. He's got quite a background, quite honestly. Served 7 years at the NAACP Legal Defense and Educational Fund. Was in the DOJ Civil Rights Division during the Obama administration. So he's got quite a background in the legal field and in the Department of Justice. So he also, and I think Ken mentioned this a time or two, but he was also involved in a number of cases against Trump, and actually found him. One of the things that he was able to accomplish was dissolving Trump's former charity, the New York-based charity that he was involved in, the Donald J. Trump Foundation, and he had. So he's done a lot, been involved in a lot of legal matters involving Trump. So you can see that his experience and background with dealing with Trump would be very valuable in what they were trying to do with this current trial. So. And as we know, and it's been reported, he was, at the time that he went to serve with Alvin Bragg, he was the number 3 guy at the DOJ, Department of Justice. So obviously, a lot of eyebrows were raised with regard to him leaving that position and going to work for a district attorney. And I don't know, quite honestly, I don't know. I think the truth will eventually sometime come out.
It will.
Truth has a way of doing that,
Yep.
but it takes a long time. But at this point in time, the Department of Justice is claiming that They had nothing to do with him going to the New York trial. They could not. They had no record of any emails or any communication to lead one to suspect that. They have flatly claimed that they did not dispatch Colangelo to this trial. So they have and these statements, these claims of no communication, etc., comes from an assistant attorney general in the Department of Justice. So Representative Jordan and some other Congress people have requested this information, and the DOJ has flatly said they don't have it, that it's not true. Once again, I think at this point in time, that's about all we know about him. But I think the truth will come out someday.
Yes, it will.
It's going to take a while, I think.
Okay. Well, I give kudos to both Ken and Dale because you were fair and balanced in your reporting on these two prosecutors. Okay, you gave both sides of the story. It looks to me like something smells in Denmark, but who knows? Okay, let's move on to Gary, and let me ask Gary to talk about the charge that they brought against Trump.
John, I'm not going to be fair and balanced. And as a matter of fact, I think you misnamed this show, calling it a travesty of justice. I think it's a travesty of injustice. But that's an aside. So the charge in this case was falsifying business records. Now you might think, a charge of falsifying business records. Logic says that you falsify business records because you want to defraud your partners. You want to defraud other investors. You want to defraud the corporation, something like that. That's not what happened here. There's no victim of this supposed falsifying the business records. It's sort of implied that the falsified business records allowed Trump to run for president and hide information about himself or something. He committed a fraud on the American public. You kind of have to invent something here, but there was not a victim. And as far as whether or not the payments that Donald Trump made or his organization made to his attorney, there were 34 payments, which is typically money paid in a retainer is paid like monthly. So there were 34 payments. So they alleged 34 separate charges so that they could say, this is just one crime. Man, this is 34 crimes. And so that was, creative use of the law. And really it's a misuse of the law. This statute was being used in a way that was never intended. And I think, John, you mentioned that Andrew Cuomo, even a former prosecutor, said, no one else would ever have been charged under these circumstances.
Yeah.
And in fact, he thought, too, it was a bad idea because it has really revealed to the public at large that this is just a scheme to get Trump. And it's really creating sympathy for Trump, as people can see that the legal system is being misused just to get this guy so that they can have a soundbite that says Donald Trump, convicted felon.
Mm-hmm.
So that's what I have to say about the charge. It's an invented thing that they came up with a creative idea. How can we make Donald Trump claim that he falsified business records and made it a felony?
Okay, well, thank you, Gary. And again, we're weaving the threads that show the lack of due process. Mm-hmm. Okay, let's go on to Charlie. And Charlie, let me ask you to talk about how this was a history-making case. What's some historical piece here, Charlie?
So, well, first off, that's why we have Gary here, because he's our resident legal expert. So
Yeah.
If he's nodding along, I know that I'm on the right track. But as far as I can call it, never in American history has a local prosecutor been allowed to file charges to enforce a federal law. Normally, the Department of Justice would intervene and say, "Hey, this is not your jurisdiction; that it's ours. We'll take over." So it's an unprecedented move. Well, why? Well, this is an unprecedented president. If you can give me a little fun wordplay.
Oh, yeah.
Usually ex-presidents are taken care of. Historically speaking, you would see things like this. For example, Gerald Ford famously pardoned Richard Nixon for any crimes he may have committed in office. The federal Leviathan always looks after itself, regardless of party. These drastic moves against Trump only serve to, again, I'm not an expert like Gary. I'm just a normie. So these drastic moves against Trump only serve to prove the wild theories of crackpots like me who see this whole anti-Trump thing for what it actually is. It's an establishment insiders versus establishment outsiders issue. He's out there every day saying he's against the establishment. Who knows what the truth is? Regardless of the truth, that's what he seems to stand for. He claims he wants to, quote, drain the swamp. He wants to push back against the military-industrial complex. He wants to push back against globalism. So naturally, the establishment is fighting back. That's what everything appears to look like without, being an insider. And why wouldn't they push back? They have a good thing going, and Trump wants to ruin the party. It's a near impossible task to fight back against this system, but all the same, he's seen as a threat. Nobody else would have been, and we have Andrew Cuomo backing us up. Nobody else would have been prosecuted for any of this from either side of the aisle, unless your name is Donald Trump. Everybody left, right, and center plays along with the system. That's how they got to their position in the first place. So, everything tracks. Again, for a normie like me, is our resident legal expert nodding his head.
Uh-huh.
A little bit. So one last note on this, though, just if you'll indulge me, I have a buddy of mine who is, he would disagree with everything I just said. He thinks Trump is bad because he's bad because he's bad because he's abrasive and a meanie head, and he actually thinks Trump is a racist, even though there's never been any evidence of that. Blah blah blah. But he and I will talk about things like this because this has been going on ever since Trump was elected. It's always been the system's been out to get him. So he and I always joke about how in the future there'll be a movie made about this, and he and I see two very different movies. Mine is a serious drama about, Mr. Smith Goes to Washington, a great man who became a massively successful billionaire celebrity who could have easily joined the corrupt political establishment, but he's too much of a patriot to sell out his country that he loves to the globalists and wants to bring America back to greatness despite the federal Leviathan being out to get him. A great story in and of itself. The movie he sees is more of a comedy summed up by this amazing premise. Melania, kids, I have to become the president of the United States of America in the next 6 months, or we're all going to jail. It's like an incredible movie if that's ever made, but that's the reality. We all, because we all consume different media or whatever, we all the split in the worldview that everybody has. That's the world he lives in and the world I live in. And it's either way, it's a really good movie ahead of us.
Yeah, I can't wait to see it.
Yeah.
I also can't wait to see the whole truth come out. And, It finally came out about Nixon and Watergate, and the truth will come out about this too. By the way, let me say, if you're watching live on Facebook or YouTube, you can join this conversation by just opening the comment box and posting a comment or asking a question. And Ken has got his eyes on social media. Ken, do you have anything from the viewing audience to bring to our attention at this point, or do we move on?
Not yet. I think everybody's mesmerized so far, but they've checked in. We've got a couple people that have gone ahead and checked in. So
all right, good.
Well, we get more.
Okay, the next thread in the tapestry that we're weaving has to do with the chosen venue, where they decided to file these charges. So, and I think Dale wants to talk about that, the venue.
All right, John. Not a whole lot on this, quite honestly, but obviously the venue and where you conduct this is very important. We all realize that. I mean, it affects all the different stages of the whole process. So it's very important. From what I have found in my research is it appears that in a criminal case that it's basically the venue is determined basically where the crimes were committed and or where the defendant resides when the crimes were committed. All right. Now, obviously, the venue was New York was selected as the venue. Now, this leads me to the question: am I correct that the crimes that or this alleged crimes that we're talking about, as far as the payments to the attorney, that those were made when he resided in New York? Am I correct?
I think so.
But as far as election interference in 2020, he resided in Florida. Am I correct?
Yeah, by that time he had moved to Mar-a-Lago.
Yeah. So, and not to mention the fact that, of course, that's a federal crime or alleged crime. But so why was which crime is he being held to with regard to selecting the venue? I guess is what I'm getting at here.
Mm-hmm.
And obviously, the venue played an important role here in this case. New York was obviously a very, very democratic territory area. So anyway, so that's basically it. I guess as far as the venue is concerned, it was based on where he resided at the time that these 34 crimes allegedly were committed. So,
yeah, well, and Manhattan, something like 88 or 90% of the vote went for Biden. And so what were Trump's chances of getting an unbiased jury? And that's why Trump's attorneys asked for a change of venue.
Right.
And they were denied a change of venue. And it seems to me, as someone who hasn't spent 1 hour in law school, but someone who has watched quite a few Perry Mason episodes, that
wait a minute, I don't know if a lot of people know who Perry Mason is.
Well, he's an old guy who was a lawyer.
Yeah.
But for due process to take place, you see, according to the 5th and 14th Amendments of the Constitution, you've got to have a chance to get an unbiased jury. And I don't think Trump had a chance in that particular venue. And so my unschooled, uneducated opinion is that a change of venue just might have been in order. Well, friends, we're going to take a little break now and see one of the pre-recorded segments of tonight's roundtable. This is some guy named John who has a journal, and he's going to talk to you about something that's current in the culture. John Ackerman for Convention of States, Indiana. I want to talk for a couple of minutes about DEI. Diversity, Equity, Inclusion. Two of those words can be good if understood properly, but only two of them. Let's start at the beginning. Diversity. I believe in diversity. The world is diverse Just take a look around. There's liquid, there's air, there's gases, there's solids, all kinds of diverse things in nature. God is diverse. In the book of Genesis, God says, let us make man in our image. Plural. Theologians and Bible scholars have written a lot about what is meant by that plural. But one of the things that it could mean is that God is the triune God, Father, Son, and Holy Spirit. Diversity. Let us make man in our image. And look at the humankind that he made. Red and yellow, black and white. All are precious in his sight. Jesus loves the little children of the world. Remember that childhood song? How true it is. We are diverse. God is diverse. I believe in diversity because that's the way God made the world. E stands for equity. Bad thought. Bad concept. Can't buy into that at all. It sounds good to the untrained ear. Equity. Who doesn't want equity? Well, here's the catch. We are created equal in the eyes of God. Declaration of Independence says that. We hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal. That means equal value, equal worth, equal opportunity, equal standing in the eyes of God. Equity, on the other hand, is concerned with equal outcomes. Everybody who has a job should make the same pay. Everybody who takes a class should get the same grade. Everybody has equal outcomes. Nowhere in the created order, or in philosophical literature, or in biblical literature, will you find anything about equity. The proponents of equity want government to force equal outcomes. Take from the rich, give to the poor. Romantic notion that worked for Robin Hood, but it doesn't work in real life. And the E of DEI is just flat out wrong. The I stands for inclusion. Hey, I'm all for inclusion, as long as it's inclusive, as long as it includes everybody. The problem with the left's understanding of inclusion is that it excludes everybody who disagrees with them. I'm not included because I'm not a leftist. If you're not a leftist, you're not included either. They just want to include the people that they favor. So this current concept of DEI, diversity, equity, and inclusion, is just wrong. It's just wrong. And my heart hurts because of all the money that's being spent hiring DEI officers in school boards, colleges, universities, corporations. And if you look at what they're doing, so many of them are just dividing the population into little subgroups and forcing unnatural behaviors upon students and employees. So let DEI DIE. Let it die. Hey, since I made that video, I've noticed in the news some, not a lot, but some major corporations have begun to ban DEI practices, and some states have begun to ban that practice in the school system. And so maybe the pendulum has already started to swing back into the direction of sanity.
Did they finally realize that it's racist? DEI is just racism by another term?
It is, yes. Charlie, thanks.
Very well.
Thanks for pointing that out. Okay. Well, Charlie, you're the next one. I want you to talk about the crime that
what crime?
There you go. What do you have to say about it?
So again, this is why I'm glad to be sitting positioned right next to our legal expert. I'll do my best. How it all started, and this was like 2018. Paying off adult film star Stormy Daniels to not speak of their adult activities together. It's this whole thing. Anytime you go into like legal stuff or whatever, it's like talking about the stock market. It's like simple yet infinitely complex, and it's all stupid at the end of the day. So, starting with a porn star, Stormy Daniels. Hey, Stormy, don't talk about things we did. Okay, great. Which definitely didn't work because we all know about it. So anyway, paying someone hush money is not illegal unless it's straight up blackmail or bribery. So what's the crime? According to NPR, the indictment includes 34 counts of falsifying business records with intent to commit another crime and aid and conceal the commission thereof. That's a Class E felony, the lowest level of felony in the state of New York. Sounds really scary, right? But in reality, Trump just gave money to his lawyer to give to Stormy. Hey, just don't talk about that thing we did, which sounds more like an accounting error than a criminal act, according to Forbes. The alleged crime that Trump's been charged with, falsification of business records, is typically classified as a misdemeanor under New York law, but is elevated to a felony when it's done to facilitate another crime. That's what prosecutors are alleging here. All 34 counts against Trump are classified as felonies, with Manhattan District Attorney Alvin Bragg arguing that the allegedly falsely labeled payments were done to cover up other crimes, including Cohen's campaign finance crimes and alleged tax issues, as the payments to Cohen were falsely characterized as income rather than repayments. They took several misdemeanors and tied them together and made a felony out of them. All of this is this confusing mess can be summed up in these words. Who cares? Again, I go back to what I said previously. Nobody cares about any of this, but also, even if some law was broken, if any other ex-president had done the exact same thing, we would never have even heard about it. Again, Trump always being the exception. All they know is that they don't like the guy. So again, according to Forbes, Trump has pleaded not guilty to the charges against him, decrying the case as a witch hunt. His attorneys have argued in legal filings that Trump's reimbursement checks to Cohen were not unlawful, writing Trump cannot be said to have falsified business records of the Trump organization by paying his personal attorney using his personal bank accounts. And again, if you ask me, I'm no expert. This seems more like it's on Trump's lawyer than on himself. But all anybody knows is that they don't like the guy because he's a big meanie head. So here we are in Fantasyland, where the hordes of sheep get to say things like he's been impeached twice and he's a convicted felon, all labels that sound really bad, but all based on trumped up lies, corruption from a federal leviathan that can only be cured peacefully by a convention of states.
Well, I like it. Thanks, Charlie. I just want to hitchhike on what you said and report that 3 days ago, on Friday, June 21st, Judge Judy, remember her, Judge Judy? She was on CNN with leftist host Chris Wallace, and she called the whole case, quote, nonsense. Wow. If you look, these are her words, if you look, you had to twist yourself into a pretzel to figure out what the crime was. That's Judge Judy. And so I wanted to hitchhike on what Charlie said and bring in a little humor from, the most famous.
Judge Judy is not a conservative either. I mean, she's.
Yeah. And she's the most famous TV judge since Judge Wapner. Okay. Now that's going back a ways. Okay.
You better watch her mouth. She's going to get canceled like Cuomo.
Oh, man. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. Well, and I think also, can I mention, I think Bill Clinton actually did pay off some hush money too. So
yeah, he did.
Right. We've all forgotten, because this would be completely forgotten and nobody would care if it hadn't been twisted into this pretzel to make it a felony.
Right. Well, we were talking about judges, and so I want to go to Dale and ask Dale to talk to our audience about the judge who presided in this infamous case.
Well, Judge Michon, a ton has been written about him. We all know who he is. We've all seen his picture. He's a New York Supreme Court judge, and he's been involved in a number of Trump cases and trials. Kind of, as a matter of fact, it's kind of questionable as to why he always seems to be picked to be involved in a Trump case. But I guess that's another issue. However, I will say from the research that I've done, many do consider him to be very fair. But that's another topic, I guess. The main issue here with Judge Michon was, should he have recused himself? And I think that's the main issue. And I think there's very good reason for him to have recused himself, although he didn't. U.S. Code 28, Section 455, talks about disqualification as a judge. And I won't read the whole thing to you, but there's a part there that talks about economic interest, and including not only the judge himself or herself, but his or her spouse and his or her children. Mm-hmm. And that has been the I guess the talking point with regard to Judge Michon and his daughter's involvement in the business that she's involved in, and the benefit that she has been realizing from this trial. So, should he have recused himself? Many of us think he should have. Now, I will say, John, and I'm trying to balance it out here, but I will say the New York, how should I say, the New York Judicial Ethics Commission had ruled that they did not see a conflict here. Oh. Yeah. So once again, I think this is another one of those things. The truth will come out eventually. Mm-hmm. But I think in the meantime, I think I'm convinced that he should have recused himself, just so that there wouldn't be any question at all as to any favoritism here. And but he didn't, and apparently has gotten away with it at this point in time. So far.
Time will tell. Okay, thank you, Dale. Now, Cheryl, you've been very patient over there in the corner, and it's your turn. In fact, I've got two topics in a row that I want to ask you to talk about. The first one is, tell us about the gag order. Okay, Cheryl?
Well, I went to a lot of sources on this subject, and pretty much they were saying the same thing. I heard one commentator say that Donald Trump was using the bully pulpit to attack the judge and therefore putting people in danger. He never mentions who those people are, but apparently he's putting them in danger. And Donald Trump was just telling the truth about what these people are making off of this whole situation, and why on earth would he be told to be quiet other than to protect the judge and his family. At least that's what I'm seeing. And I know that when you look at what's wrong, the more you see what's wrong. And the media has taken this whole situation And they keep flooding us with the same thing. I mean, about every station is saying the exact same thing. And yet the other side of the story really isn't told unless you go to, podcasters or, private media or whatever, like Tucker Carlson or somebody like that. I don't understand why somebody isn't allowed to defend themselves. And that kind of goes along with, suppressing the defense in defending Donald Trump and just trying to keep him from telling the truth. And I don't really get that. And I don't understand. I really don't understand charges and how they can. I'm going to speak to some of these other things that you guys have been saying. How they can let the jury decide what the actual crime was that he was supposed to commit in the future that made this a federal case. And that's the way I was reading how they justified the crime, is that he was going to commit another crime, or it was aiding in another crime. So that's, to me, a little confusing too. But I don't understand why the judge instructed the jury to decide what they were going to, convict him on. That it just seems to me that it's a complete orchestration that only amplifies the fact that he is not getting a fair shake.
And
And
that's called
justice cannot
due
prevail
process.
when it's not fair.
Right. Okay, Cheryl, you touched on the muzzling of the defense. Go ahead and wax eloquent on that. How did the judge keep the defense quiet?
I didn't find a lot of information on that, so maybe you guys can help me out. But I have a question about them using this Stormy Daniels case anyway. I mean, clearly, this is a woman whose moral compass is not pointing due north. And yet we stake all of this crime business on that kind of testimony. I don't know. I have a real problem with that.
Well, it was a made-up thing just to make Trump look bad. But under muzzling the defense, what we're thinking about here is that the judge would not allow one of the star witnesses of the defense to talk.
Oh, yes, I did read about
This
that.
guy was a former commissioner of the Federal Election Commission, and he was not allowed to testify. Now,
yeah, and I don't understand that at all.
where does that fit under due process?
Well, the fact that he has the right to defend himself against his accusers. He's facing his accusers, and that's part of the legal process, but he's not allowed to say anything against what they're saying.
Yeah.
I just don't agree with that.
That was very strange.
Yes.
So, okay, now Cheryl, you also touched on the jury instructions, and I'm asking our resident legal expert, Gary Harbaugh, to talk about those jury instructions. And here, folks, we might just get into the weeds a little bit. I don't know what Gary's going to say. Gary?
Well, as a matter of fact, in every trial, there are jury instructions given by the judge. And in every state, there are what they call pattern jury instructions. So in every criminal trial, one of the issues is what is reasonable doubt? And every state may have their own slight variation on exactly what that jury instruction should say. And judges are not bound to follow precisely those pattern instructions, but they're to provide a framework. And the framework makes a lot of sense when you have a normal situation where you have a crime that many people are charged with the same kind of offense, and the jurors should have the same standard to measure by. But in this case, we're talking about an invented crime, a pretzel that was twisted up to make the crime. So the judge had to create new instructions really from scratch as to how to instruct the jury on these things. And one of the interesting things is he told the jurors they didn't have to figure out any crime that they agreed upon that Trump supposedly was trying to commit. And so some might have thought, well, paying Stormy Daniels, even though that's not a crime, and maybe the false business records paying his attorney, who admitted that he was basically stealing from Trump. Maybe that was a crime. I don't know, but it was just so nebulous that the jury could take these instructions, which lasted much longer than normal jury instructions, probably left the jurors a lot confused. And the whole idea, I think, of this confusion was to guide these jurors into finding that there was really only one thing for them to do, and that is to say, we're going to find this guy guilty. Because the instructions were nebulous and the crime, the whole situation was very nebulous. And I think the judge just wanted to influence the outcome. And that's really goes to this whole idea of due process. The idea of due process is that there should be some sense of fundamental fairness about a legal proceeding. And there was no intent to have a fair proceeding in this. I just want to comment a little bit about the Stormy Daniels, why she was in this trial. Attorneys will normally stipulate things in a trial if they're really not in dispute. I'm sure Donald Trump's attorneys would have been happy to stipulate that he made payments to Michael Cohen, but the prosecution wouldn't have any of that because this was theater. This was not law. Yeah. And the theater is you bring in the former porn star and have her on the witness stand and make a big show of this. And it's really theater for the jurors, and it's not, and for the whole American public, it's not about a fair legal proceeding.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Gary. Now I'm going to ask Charlie to take out his crystal ball and look into the future and tell us, what do you think is going to happen?
Well, real quick, based on what Cheryl and Gary just said, we got a lot of comments last week. Last week was all about J6, and a lot of comments. Quick pitch. We should at some point, we should just do a whole show on horrible comments that come in. We could talk for hours about how illogical they can be and just like stupidly emotional they can be. But some of them were basically, it was like, well, if because our J6 expert would be talking about, how horrible these people have been treated, and they've been held in prison for years, just awaiting trial. And the comments will say things like, well, that's what traitors get, or, that you shouldn't tick off the government or something like that. So yeah, that just because you don't like the person doesn't mean they are stripped of due process. That's right. Just because you don't like Trump, that doesn't mean you could just do anything you want to him. That's why we have these protections in the first place. But this, to essentially overturn emotionality, because even if somebody is an alleged, I'll just say pedo, they still get the defense, because we don't know if they're guilty yet. We don't know that for sure, even if we feel a certain way. So anyway, this should all be obvious, but it's not obvious today because we live in a world of feels before reals, and the Constitution means nothing anymore. But anyway, so this will, speaking of which, this will be overturned. This is just for show. This is just a big movie, but not before the 2024 election. And that's the point. That's all the powers that be really care about. Just like a newspaper making some big false claim and then printing a retraction later when nobody cares. So what does this mean? According to Forbes, Trump was indicted in March 2023 for his role in the hush money scheme following a years-long investigation by the Manhattan District Attorney's Office that first began in 2018. It has since become one of 4 criminal cases the ex-president now faces, along with 2 federal cases and another state case in Georgia, though it is the first of the cases to go to trial with no set trial dates yet in any of the other cases. So that's 4 criminal cases and 2 impeachments. Again, that's the headline. Mm-hmm. For what? Again? Why? What's behind any of those? Again, if you can say what you want about the J6ers, and then you look into it and you're like, oh yeah, these people didn't do anything. But it looks bad when you say they fought back against their government. They're revolutionaries, but they're not when you look into it. And that's the point. Clearly the system doesn't like them. Therefore, anybody that doesn't like the system tends to like Trump. He made a lot of money off of this. So either this will be an effective means of convincing people that Trump is actually a monstrous criminal, or it will turn him into a martyr and galvanize the masses to vote for him and support him with their dollars. Obviously, I believe it will be the latter because we've already been seeing this. Seems pretty obvious since he was able to raise record numbers of donations on the back of this. And then once again, even, former governor of New York, Andrew Cuomo, agrees. So, Trump's an exception because these people can't help themselves. They have to keep attacking. They can't not do something about it. And I don't know if you're all aware of the Streisand effect. I think it's a meme that's maybe 5 years old at the most, but basically the more you try to hide something, the more light you shed on it, especially in the internet age. So the more they attack Trump, the more powerful he gets, which is hilarious. It's very funny, especially somebody like me. So it's so painfully obvious that this man is being unfairly beaten down when everywhere you look today, you see nothing but corruption. So you have nothing but evidence of this giant corrupt beast. And then you have this guy that's like, I don't like you. And then he's being, we literally have former porn stars coming out of the woodwork to shut him down. I mean, it's like, it doesn't get better than this. So we've reached peak corruption in this country where everybody seems to get away with whatever they want, so long as they abide by the progressive, communist, DEI, anti-white, anti-male, anti-human, globalist America is bad narrative. So on and so forth. Those who speak out against this devil, this 666 utopia, are held to account for the slightest infraction. And then, meanwhile, Pelosi and everybody on every side of the aisle can go, buy stock in whatever, defense contractor and come out rich. Blah, blah, blah. Same old story. This is literally an accounting error that's being weaponized to steal an election that will determine the fate of the world, for better or worse. Donald Trump is no angel, far from it, but we don't need angels right now. We need monsters like Trump to fight these hordes of actual racists, actual sexists, actual anti-humanists seeking to destroy all we've built with, DEI and all the fun stuff that we have to deal with every day. And you don't get anywhere by being a nice person. Trump wouldn't be in the position he's in right now if he was a nice guy. That's why none of us are up there, but he's the one taking all the slings and arrows, and we'll see. The more they push him down, the higher he rises. So it's going to be a very entertaining next 6 months.
Okay, thank you, Charlie. You hit the ball out of the park. Woo! Yeah. Okay, Ken, you have something for us.
Yes, our astute viewers have a couple of things that I think were not covered tonight. So I'm going to throw these up real quick because I know we're getting short. Here's one from one of our favorite viewers, Certain Elf. He says, what was the deal with the outcome being leaked to a jury member's family member, and how should that impact things?
Wow, I don't know what that's about. Anybody on the round table?
I had heard something about that the decision was leaked ahead of time, but I never really heard why. Well, we know why, but really what the repercussions were from that.
I think it was a cousin or a relative of one of the jurors that happened to post something on social media, and it was picked up on social media before the announcement was made. So that's where, but it was, again, I think it was tamped down. It was blown up, and nothing ever came of it.
Well, that's something that needs to be investigated and brought up at the appeal.
Agreed.
Yeah.
And that brings me to the other comment that one of our other viewers has brought up. He mentions the fact that he had asked if an organization like COS could be used like a temporary investigative group, like CIA or FBI, that could be convened to investigate the deep state, we the people. Says don't need an understanding federal government group, branches, etc. So we'd like to see a private group, and he suggests maybe COS as the group to be able to do that. I don't know.
I'll do it as long as I will do it if I have a camera crew following me live streaming 24/7, even when I'm sleeping. so I don't just randomly fall out a window or something. Then I'll do it.
David, that's a great idea.
Organizations that do that, like Judicial Watch.
Yeah.
I mean, they're constantly watching what the government is doing and voter rolls and all of that.
So David might be onto something there. I don't know that COS has the wherewithal, the resources to do that, but it would be cool if somebody would. Okay, well, we've done our best to weave a tapestry that shows very clearly that due process has been denied to the 45th President of the United States. And that brings us to the end of this month's Roundtable. Before we close it out, I want to give you our email address, as we do every week. If you have any questions at all about Convention of States, you can email them to us at this address, raiseyourvoicecos@gmail.com. That's raiseyourvoicecos@gmail.com. I want to invite you to tune in next Monday, July the 1st at 7 p.m. Eastern for our next COS Indiana Live, when we're going to have Natalie Forbing to talk about Title IX and Moms for Liberty, talking about all these things that are going on in the culture now. And our next roundtable will be on the fourth Monday of July. That'll be July the 22nd at 7 p.m. Eastern, and we will decide the topic later. Now, to close us out, here is episode number 7 of COS Basics, The Meaning of Values. Good night. John Ackerman for Convention of States, Indiana. This is video number 7 of COS Basics, and I want to recap our core values. The first 6 videos, in each one I talked at length about each core value. And just to review, we are committed to constitutional originalism. We want to foster responsible self-governance. We cultivate servant leaders. We strive to be kind. We want to produce meaningful results. And we revere Judeo-Christian values. These, in a nutshell, are the core values of Convention of States. But I ask myself, and maybe you've asked, what is a value? And this video, in addition to recapping the 6 core values, is to give you an understanding of why I believe, and why COS, I think, believes that values are so important. We have these 6 core values, but what is a value? One of the more preeminent thinkers and writers on values of the last century was Brian Hall, a man whose books I read with enthusiasm, and a man I had the opportunity to meet one time when he led a workshop in my hometown. And according to Brian Hall, a value has 4 characteristics. And so, first of all, a value has to be freely chosen from among known alternatives. If it's forced on you, if you have no choice, it's not a value. It's something that you do or something that you observe. But in order for it to be a value, it has to be a free choice. Secondly, not only freely chosen, but acted upon. If you say, well, I have a value of good dental hygiene, but you never brush and never floss, it's not really a value because you're not acting on it. For it to be a value, it has to be something you do something about. It changes your behavior. So a value is something that is freely chosen and acted upon. And then it must contribute to the self's meaning. That is to say, it becomes part of your self-understanding. This is who I am. And to use the dental hygiene thing, part of who you are is you're a person who values dental hygiene, and you have clean teeth, and you fight off periodontal disease, gum disease, and all those kinds of things because you believe in and practice dental hygiene. And so it is part of who you are, part of your identity. And then finally, for it to be a value, it must enhance the self's worth. So you see, a value is a positive thing. If you go around killing people who don't believe with your religion, that's not a value. That's a negative thing. For something to be a value, it has to be worth enhancing. It has to enhance your self-worth. And so I offer you these understandings of how important the 6 core values are to Convention of States. These are things that we have freely chosen from among alternatives. These are things we act upon. These are things that determine our self-understanding, our meaning, our identity, and they are things that enhance our worth and our worthiness and our worthwhileness. So as you think about your own values, think about those 4 characteristics of a value. And as you think about Convention of States, think, this is really who we are. We have chosen these values. We act upon them. They define our self-understanding, our meaning, and they enhance our worth.